So today we're going to take a look at some applications of geometry. And when you hear about geometry, we're actually talking about 2D and 3D shapes. Now, I'm not going to talk to you like some all-knowing person about geometry. I may be a mathematician and I've studied it well, but I want you guys to understand that geometry is everywhere. It says here that geometry is the foundation behind design of many real-world things. Now, how geometry is considered in designing something can affect the way the object looks because of the repeated patterns that are being used or the different combinations of different 2D shapes that you are using to build the object. Okay? Now, geometry, if you think about it, can be seen in a variety of contexts. We're going to look at these contexts in this activity. Now, we're going to look at the main object in the two following pictures. We're going to identify as many geometric shapes. Notice we said shapes. Yes? Not objects. Okay? So we're going to go and only focus on the 2D aspect of the shapes that make up the 3D shapes. Okay? So, for example, if I'm looking at the car that we have on this as one of our shapes we're going to be working with, I'm not looking for the overall 3D shape like a cylinder or something like that. What I want to see is what the 3D shapes we have. So here's a quick reminder of some stuff that you learned about in grade 9. Hopefully it doesn't give you any traumatic experiences. For all of you in Ontario that are taking this course, we've all had to take this formula sheet for the grade 9 applied test for EQAO, and you had to know these different basic shapes: a rectangle, a parallelogram, a triangle, a trapezoid, and a circle. And we also know what a semicircle is. And what you're going to do is you're going to look at this shape. Okay, and what you're going to do is you're going to pick out all of the different things in the 3D shape that are made up of individual smaller 2D shapes. Okay, so for example, if I'm looking at this front wing here, I can tell you that in the front wing here, that we actually have a rectangle. Okay? And we're going to write rectangle as part of our solution. Because all we're trying to do is identify all of the different individual pieces that help to make up the entire 3D object for this car. All right. Pause the video and go through all of the possible ones that you got here. All right. And wow, those are the only things I could see. Okay. Now there's circles for the wheels. There's a trapezoid. There's a trapezoid for the front wing of the car. Okay. There's also a trapezoid or a parallelogram used for the back wing. Then there's rectangles here. There's also another trapezoid on the actual fuselage of the car. Okay. And then there's another rectangle that it connects to get to the other fuselage of the car. And that's it. Now, let's go take a look at the next picture that we have on our sheet here. The next picture that we have on our sheet is this. I don't know, what would you call it? A barn? And we're going to take the barn and we're going to do the same thing again. And this time, do exactly the same thing and tell me all the possible shapes that you see. All right, pause the video, go. Okay, and we've come to our conclusion that we've got a rectangle, which is found right here. We also have triangles found here. We also have triangles here. We have a trapezoid. Okay, and then we have a triangle up top here. If we're looking at it dead on, and we're looking at another triangle, we're looking at another triangle if we're looking at it dead on here as well. This looks like a rectangle, but we know it's not quite a rectangle. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the farmhouse. And when we look at the farmhouse, we have to recognize that this is in a 3D world, right? Something that's in 3 dimensions, when I'm looking at it dead on, I have to make inferences about it and come up with ideas of other shapes that are being used to make up that entire building. Now, when you think of that entire building, this building, like this thing right here, okay, that thing looks kind of like a can, doesn't it? Now, it looks like a can if you think about it. If you walked around it, it would look like a circle from above, but a rectangle from the side. And we call that something that you studied a while back called a cylinder. So this silo is made up of a cylinder, isn't it? Okay. What I'd like you to do now is see if you can come up with other multiple shapes or any other descriptions of any parts that belong to either the house or the car. Of any, not shapes, but figures. Okay? Geometric figures. So pause the video, try again, look to see if there's any geometric figures that we can talk about in any of these pictures. Oh, that was good. One of you guys came up with the idea of a pentagon. That was good. The shape of the front of this barn is a 5-sided shape, which is called a pentagon. And then because it has a depth to it, we call this thing a prism, a pentagonal prism. Uh-oh, I spelled prism wrong. Uh-oh. Prism. All right, so we have prisms in our farm. We have cones. We have prisms in our farm. We also have a cylinder, which represents the wheel on the car. We have cylinders for the roll cages. We have an 8-side, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Ooh. An 8-sided prism. I'm not sure what that is. I think one of you guys said it was an octagon. So, and this one also has a prism built into it. But you get the idea. All of these different things make up all of these real world objects that we see and use every single day. Now, think of the advantages of geometric shapes that we defined, right? Let's identify at least one way that a geometric shape in the object affects how the object looks and how the object works. So let's go and take a look at those different things that we were looking at before. Remember, we were talking about our car and our farm. And now let's begin. So when you think about the geometric shape and how it works, when you're looking at the overall shape of the car, what does it look like? Now just take a moment and just come up with some words that you would use to describe how the shapes affect how it looks. Okay? Thanks. Come up with 3. And then I will give you what I heard from my students today. And so for the car, my kids said it looked really streamlined. It was unique and it had a really cool factor. It looked fast, they said. Now, there are a couple shapes on here that help the car do what it needs to do. So I'm going to ask you to consider the wheels of the car. Okay? When you think about the wheels of the car, what does it do? Well, it makes contact with the road and it rolls. And because of that rolling motion, the rolling motion makes the movement of the car smooth. Now, what about the fins at the front and the rear? So if I'm talking about the fins at the front or at the rear, it doesn't really matter. The fins at the front are positioned in such a way to cause the car to get sucked onto the ground. The air rushes over the wing and pushes the car down on the ground. That's what it does. And essentially we get increased grip from that. So now let's go and answer our questions about the farm. So when we're looking at the geometric shape and how it works, let's just talk about the farm. So when you look at the roof, the slant is steep. Also, the color of the parts of the barn give it some accents, doesn't it? But I'm going to actually focus on this thing here, the slant of the roof. Now, if you think about it, it's about to snow, isn't it? And boy, does it snow in Canada. And the slant of the roof, depending on where you are in Canada, basically causes that snow that builds up to eventually slide off the side of your house. Now, what about this thing here? The silo. Why is the silo in the shape of a cylinder? Pause the video and think about it for a second. And today one of my students said that the silo is a can. It looks like a can. Now, the reason why we use a silo instead of a square-based silo is because you can hold more in a cylinder than a prism. That's it. All right, so a few specific areas in which we see geometry is architecture, fashion, and product design. All of these categories, geometry can affect how the object looks, feels, and works. Now, when you look at this thing here, right, you've seen this. This used to be one of the tallest structures on the planet. Actually, it was the tallest structure on the planet for a while. And then someone decided to build something just a little bit taller. This is called the Eiffel Tower. Take a look at the repeated shape in here. Do you see it? The repeated shape is a triangle. Okay? Now, the triangles are also set up in such a way that they kind of help to create squares as well. But the basic shape for everything in there is a triangle. And it turns out that the triangle is a repeated shape in many different places in nature, right? Now, a repeated shape that makes up a pattern or an entire object is called a tessellation. A tessellation. Now, you've seen tessellations when older people try to basically outdo themselves during the winter season to see who has the most ugliest sweater before the winter break. You've seen those sweaters, the repeated ugly colors of like green, red, orange, and purple. And the colors are all in the same shape. That's called a tessellation. So let's move on to the next part here. So how might the use of these repeated shapes affect the structure? In this case, there's a lot less air resistance because there is a lot less material holding up the building. But at the same time, there's a lot more support and stability based on the fact that all of those triangles are interlocking and creating an upward force to keep the top of that building from falling down. Okay? Now, when you look at this, how does it affect the appearance of the overall structure? Now, for me, I think it actually looks cool. Whoops, not cool. Some people would say it's visually appealing. And this structure is still one of the most famous structures on the planet. People still go to Paris to see it. All right, now let's go take a look at a serious topic. Okay? We're talking about fashion here. Okay? This time we're actually going to take a look at baseball caps. All right? Take a look at these baseball caps. Pause the video and tell me what you think the primary geometric shape of the baseball cap is. And then we'll discuss the rest of these concepts. So the primary geometric shape is called a hemisphere, also known as a half sphere. Okay, so if you can't remember the word hemisphere, call it half sphere. Okay. Now, how is this shape useful? What do you think? And it fits nicely on the head. So the shape does affect the appearance because it does look nice. And the reason why it looks nice is because it nicely fits people's heads. And just take a moment and write that down. And now let's move on to the last concept of the day, and then you can get on with your homework. So when we take a look at a box of cereal, its primary shape when we look at a box of cereal is a rectangular prism. And how is this shape useful for a product? Well, the reason why is because it's very easy to store. Individually and with multiple boxes that are identical to it, and pour. Now, how does the shape affect its appearance? Well, this makes it look like there's a lot in there. A lot in there. Okay. And it allows space for the logo. And air in the box for protection. So now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to work on handout 6.1. All right, that's it. Have a good day.